So, yeah, here we are. So there it is.
That ball cap wasn't made for a cranium of your capacity.
Certainly not. Certainly not. So this is what it looks like up close. So today is it is the greatest day in the year for every Marine. Today is the 10th of November, and a little Marine Corps lore here. Everyone should know a little bit about our Marine Corps, but a little bit of lore. The story goes that the Marine Corps was formed on the 10th of November in 1775 at a place called Tun Tavern, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Marines put a high value on the length of time that someone has been doing something. So the longer you've been in the Marine Corps, the saltier you are. And the converse is also true. So if one person joined the Marine Corps on January 2nd and his friend joined on January 3rd, the later enlistee could refer to the earlier one as a boot. So the story goes that Tun Tavern, Pennsylvania, 10 November 1775, a couple of friends heard about this new military organization that was being set up called the Marine Corps. So they both hitched a ride over to Tun Tavern and got in line, but they got separated in the line. And one of the guys was kind of like first in line, and the second one was at the end of the line and didn't get to sign up till near the end of the day. So they got together that night in the barracks, and the first guy says, hey, this Marine Corps is going to be a pretty good deal. I really liked it after I signed the papers and they swore me in. You know, they had beer and chips and stuff like that there. It was good. And the second guy said, what are you talking about? When I signed up and swore in, there was no beer. There were no chips there. First guy says, yeah, darn, it sure isn't like the old Corps. That's kind of an inside joke. Mm. One other little tidbit here, as long as I've got it handy, is this hat. You'll notice the hat has a picture of a bulldog on it. And if you've ever been around any Marine Corps installation, you'll see pictures of bulldogs. Oftentimes, the command will actually have a bulldog in a doghouse and a whole thing. It looks just like the one in my hat there. And the reason for that is, the legend is this, that in World War I at the Battle of Belleau Wood, which was a key battle in Belleau Wood, it kept the Germans from marching into Paris and perhaps winning the war. Marines were outnumbered, and they got beat up pretty bad, but they succeeded in that battle. And the legend is that the Germans thought that the Marines fought so ferociously that they fought like Teufelhunden, which translates into English as devil dog. So ever since that, the Marine Corps, one of the symbols has been the bulldog, and oftentimes Marines are called, hey, devil dog, leatherneck, devil dog, jarhead. Jarhead, there are a lot of explanations for the term jarhead, but the one I like the best is this. What does a Marine wear in his head? Not a hat.
A jar?
No. A cover.
A cover.
A cover.
Not a lid.
It's a cover. So you put a cover on top of your head. What do you put on top of a jar? A cover. So anyhow, today is a big day, and Marines all over the world will celebrate this day. It'll be a holiday for everyone that can take a holiday. There'll be a really special meal in the mess hall, turkey and all that sort of stuff, turkey and trimmings, and even a cigar on the chow line. Well, I don't know. In this kind of what's the word I'm looking for here?
PC.
Yeah, era, perhaps no more cigars. But I was really surprised that I enlisted in July, got out of boot camp near the end of October. I was sent from there to a place called Advanced Combat Training, which was even worse than boot camp. And on the 10th of November, I was fortunate enough to be put on mess duty, which means instead of getting up at 5:30 and going out and humping the hills, you get up at 5 in the morning and go to work in the mess hall and probably don't get out of there until 8 o'clock that night. But even so, when the messman went through that chow line, there was that cigar in a chow line. So a little bit of really interesting but actually useless information for anybody except Marines. And I suppose there will be folks out there in other branches of the service would say, well, what else is new? So let me go from the Marine Corps birthday to Zemi Ikotny. And we start out, of course, with the daily news. Pretty much the same as always. This is Reverend William Barber, president of Repairers of the Breach and co-anchor of the Poor People's Campaign. Close races in swing states and President Donald Trump's lies about voter fraud, first clause in the first sentence, have created widespread anxiety and general acceptance that America is more divided than ever. Well, I'll give you a clue as to why there's a perception that America is more divided than ever. The reason for that is because America is more divided than ever. We've had 40 years of neo-Marxism infecting our colleges and schools and our governmental institutions, taking the country to an extremely hard left. So it got to the point where we don't even know the difference between girls and boys, taking it down to a really simple level. Yeah, the country is more divided than ever.
And reverends who bear false witness.
Exactly. But he goes on to say, but polarization is a political tactic that has long been deployed by people who do not want change in America's political and economic system. That's me, yeah, especially the economic system. Yes, division is real, but Americans are incredibly united in an understanding that our system is not working for most of us. I couldn't find a better advocate for my own position than this guy, Reverend William J. Barber II. That's kind of scary. It means this has happened once before. This is the second. As billionaires have watched their wealth grow exponentially during the Wuhan virus pandemic, most Americans have struggled to make ends meet while caring for children at home, finding PPE to keep themselves safe, and wondering why their government cannot pass a relief bill. Some of the benefits in the initial Wuhan virus relief bill helped the wealthiest Americans. Though people did receive one-time checks from the government, that money was spent long before tens of millions were able to get back to work. This year's economic crisis has served to highlight the extreme inequality that the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, this is scary, has sought to address since our launch in 2018. Now that's interesting. What else happened in 2018? Who was elected? I'm beginning to see the connection here. When we look closely at the economic reality for everyday Americans, we found that 140 million people were either poor or low income, just one emergency away from not being able to make it. But this is not new. The long story of inequality in America is that race, politics, and cultural wedge issues have deployed consistently to divide and conquer coalitions of Native, Black, white, brown, and Asian Americans who have pushed this nation to guarantee equal treatment under law and an economy that works for everyone. Those wounds don't go away when we commit to tackle poverty, but there is a promise that they can heal when we recognize that some things are not about left or right, but about right versus wrong. They're not about left or right, but they're about right versus wrong. It's wrong that nearly half of citizens of the richest nation in the world struggle to make ends meet. Ending poverty is a moral issue that can and must unite us all. Count me out. Gosh. You know, I wonder, we need to have our public auditor interview this guy and see if he can say this stuff with a straight face like Ray Topaznia.
That's one of the first times I've seen someone mention Asian Americans in some sort of group that's been disparaged in America, because they are not, or
No,
we are not.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, Asian Americans are discriminated against at Yale and Harvard. They've got quotas. We can't let too many Asians in here, you know. But it's obvious why he included, he starts out with Native, Black, and brown, and he throws in white and Asian Americans more as cover than anything else. Yeah. All right. Now we turn to the Post. Public health must step up on disclosures of Wuhan virus 19, Wuhan virus clusters tracing. Public Health Director Art St. Augustine on Monday revealed the reason why his department has not been publicly naming places that have had Wuhan virus clusters recently, unless the entities care enough about our community that they volunteer disclosure. St. Augustine mentioned in a press conference Monday that the department isn't naming Wuhan virus clusters because public health is worried about legal liability as a department. Now, this guy's a director. Legal liability as a department. So it's better to not let, you know, if you don't want, well, anyhow, you know, it's just so simple. So you're going to cover up anything that might expose people to danger, all in the name of preventing getting stuck with any liability yourself.
Unless your name is McCrouts.
Exactly. Why public health is leaving this disclosure optional is baffling when the lives and safety of our community are at stake. In this pandemic, Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services' primary concern should be giving members of the public all the information they need to protect themselves from getting afflicted with Wuhan virus. Here it gets more interesting as we go. St. Augustine said the department will seek a legal opinion with Guam's Attorney General's office. The department, not him, not the director. Not me. The department is doing that. It's those folks over there. Now, we're how many, 8 months into this? And he's just now trying to figure out what the law is? And as I mentioned yesterday, in the context of Ray Topaznia, a serial violator of the open government law, when a director deals with whether or not disclosure is appropriate, as for example, in a sunshine law request, a lot of what answer he gets depends on what question he asks. So if the question is, do I have to provide this information? Is there some way I can avoid providing this information? the lawyer puts on one hat. If the director says, is there any reason I can't provide this information? The lawyer puts that hat aside and puts on another hat. If the director says, what is the law on this subject? The lawyer is going to put on a different hat. Remember, lawyers are advocates. So an advocate will ordinarily, within the ethics of the profession, advocate the position of his client. So if the client doesn't want to disclose, then it's the lawyer's job to figure out if there's some legal justification for not disclosing. That's just the way it works. So looking for a paper here. Yeah, I do have it. So I want to let's ask the folks to get out their Law and Order notebooks, Jose. Okay, so we have a sunshine law, and the sunshine law says if you send an email to a director and you say I want you to email me the following public records, and you describe them in such a way that the records are identifiable, the director is supposed to email that stuff back to you. Now, sometimes directors don't do that, and they will give you a wrong answer, and they'll say, we're prohibited from sending that by the law, or we can't do that because it's against the law. Well, here's what the law says. 5 GCA 10108, limitation on right of inspection, except as provided in 10109 of this chapter, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to require disclosure of records that are any of the following. A, records pertaining to pending litigation. B, records of complaints to or investigations by, etc. C, personnel, medical, or similar files, the disclosure of which constitute an unwarranted information. So the statute 10108 does not say you can't provide those. It says you don't have to. Big difference. So when Topaznia trotted out his lawyer's letter, and the lawyer said, "Boy, he cited the law," that meant Topaznia didn't have to. I mean, not that Topaznia was prohibited from releasing the documents, it's just that he didn't have to. So what do we look at from a director? We're looking at directors who want to release everything unless there's a good reason not to. And here we have a director who says, San Augustine said the department will seek a legal opinion with the Attorney General's office. So what's he asking the attorney? Is there some way that I don't have to do this? Is that what he's asking? And why is he withholding the documents and then asking? This is gross incompetence. So we are nearly 9 months into this pandemic, and public health still hasn't been able to get a legal opinion from the AG's office when all it needs is an email or a phone call to the Attorney General. The issue of public disclosures for Wuhan virus clusters has been raised before, but resurfaced after Black Construction stepped forward last weekend to disclose that more than half of its 312 foreign workforce have tested positive, etc. Even when foreign workers were locked down, the community knows they will have to trace their recent activities to find out if they somehow were in places where local workers for the construction company had been. Black Construction assured in a press conference with St. Augustine, the company's medical advisor, Dr. Hua Gwen, that the projects on Anderson are isolated from public access, etc. We're thankful for many private businesses like Black that stepped up to disclose. But disclosure should not be optional. The governor and public health have been telling us to do our part. Mask up, keep a safe distance from others, sanitize your hands. They can't keep telling us to do our part when they're falling short of their obligation to us, the public, to give us all the information we need to protect ourselves. Public health, step up with public disclosures. It was okay for public health to disclose Gilboza and Zero Down as hot spots, but not businesses that have opted for secrecy. The public's right to know and safety should trump DPHS's fears of a hypothetical lawsuit. An extremely dismal performance on the part of Art San Augustine. And as I just pointed out, the law doesn't prohibit him from releasing that information. If anything, it might allow him, but I don't even see that. I can't see why the information pertaining to those places are not public records and easily disposable. I would hope. That's two in a row here. Art San Augustine at Public Health and Ramon Topaznia at Gura that look at the open government law and they have their own way of interpreting it. It looks like this. They thumb their nose at it. So, Governor, if you want to be branded as not transparent, these folks work for you. You better do something about it because that's exactly how it looks. This Art San Augustine, well, the Department of Public Health and Social Services is trying to get an opinion from the Attorney General after all this time. Okay, this time I would say that the Post hit the nail on the head, and once again, the Guam Daily Post gets a blue star. So we'll take a short break and come back to the card.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
As the island takes a stand against the coronavirus, so do the professionals at Horizon Properties. As a property owner and with the current health scare the island is facing, the last thing you should worry about is collecting rental payments or sending out a repairman to your property. Let Horizon Properties take care of that for you as you remain safe at home. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at www.horizonproperties.com. Horizon Properties, always there for you.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are back on air again, and I apologize for not chiming in on Facebook, but for some reason I can't see Facebook comments on my screen, which is not unusual. Facebook goes out of its way to make itself more difficult to use. I suppose they've screened me and said, this guy's a conservative Republican. Let's throw all the bugs into the system that we can to make it as tough on him as we possibly can. Okay, on the card, I've got Lee Weber versus voters. I've got Trump versus the mail. I've got the Vigilance Committee versus Topaznia, which I spent a little time on already. I've got the Burn versus the legislature. Black Lives Matter versus white coats, and Cornell versus English. So yesterday, one of our regular callers named Martinez called and pointed out that notwithstanding my abhorrence of the current incumbents in the legislature and my expressed lack of faith in any of them, they were all reelected except for one, and that the gaps were filled by former incumbents. And Martinez said, well, that means the people have spoken. I suppose that's a sort of a symbolic way of stating it. But for me, that's the beginning of the story and not the end of the story. So my first analysis was that after the great salary smash and grab of November 2014, 7 rascals were turned out. This time around, obviously, only 1 rascal was turned out, and that's probably because her name wasn't on the ballot. I'm talking about somebody whose name appeared on the ballot as Kelly Marsh, but who has been presenting herself far and wide as Kelly Marsh Titano. So perhaps people thought, I want to vote for that Titano, but her name wasn't there, so I didn't vote for her. This is what we call hoist with your own petard, which I'll explain someday. She was hoist with her own petard. So my analysis was that obviously the incumbent always has a significant advantage because the incumbent gets earned media without even trying. Just for showing up, the incumbent gets earned media. And for the challenger, especially the challenger who doesn't have media sense, it's hard to get earned media. And earned media is extremely important because name ID is, in any political situation, very important. And I've expressed the point before that people would rather vote for somebody they don't like than somebody they don't know. So earned media is the way that a challenger can make himself known. The group of challengers that we had this time, except for one, were not adept at all at getting earned media. Some of them I don't think got any earned media at all. Not a single word in the newspaper or on TV. This is compounded by the fact that this was an extremely unusual campaign because of the Wuhan virus. So if you are a candidate, you do the best you can to get earned media. You spend your money on paid media. How you do that has a lot to do with how successful you are. And then you also, if you're really serious, you're going to do as much retail campaigning as you possibly can. Well, the opportunities for retail campaigning this year disappeared. There was no, first of all, there was no primary election, which is, a little earned media for some. There was no Government of Guam Labor Day picnic where a candidate could wander around for 8 hours and shake and howdy with literally hundreds of people, kiss 100 babies, etc., and engage in some really serious retail campaigning. A candidate that wants to do retail campaigning can't go to the mall, either the mall food courts, and walk around and see if he can make eye contact with someone who perhaps he could press the flesh with. So retail campaigning was just about out of the picture. So you take the lack of retail campaigning, and the fact that none of the challengers, and I'm not including the former senators in this, none of the challengers seem to have much media savvy at all. So the advantage that incumbents have was multiplied in spades this time around. Now, the only person that I am not able to quite figure out is Ken Leon Guerrero, because I said before the election, Ken Leon Guerrero was almost a textbook as to how a challenger should begin. Point number one, you don't wait, you don't file your papers and then say, well, I guess I'll start campaigning now. You start campaigning a year before the election, and you figure out what you could do so that people will know you. They know what you stand for. You do that by trying to get some earned media, etc. You speak to the issues, you testify on bills, you write letters to the editor, you're a regular caller to the talk shows, etc. This is how one goes about campaigning. Well, one candidate did that, Ken Leon Guerrero. And I thought that Ken Leon Guerrero was a shoo-in to be elected. And so did Martinez. Well, not a shoo-in, but Martinez picked him as finishing in the money. And he didn't. And he wasn't even close. He was way out of the money. So I have a hard time explaining that. Even the thesis that people would rather vote for someone they don't like rather than someone they don't know doesn't work, because even if Ken Leon Guerrero's aggressive campaign tactics cause some people not to like him, probably very few people, if you would ask on their way into the polls, have you ever heard of somebody named Ken Leon Guerrero? Probably almost everyone would have said yes. So it was a hard election to call. Once again, the incumbents had a large advantage. I will tell you that I don't like to see elections when there's no turnover. I don't think it's healthy to have elections where incumbents have too big of an advantage, because challengers bring new blood into the legislature, sometimes new ideas, new thinking, balance, et cetera, et cetera. So if you always put the same people in there that have always been there, you're pretty much going to get the same thing that you always got. So Lee Weber wrote a column on Monday that kind of ties into what I'm talking about here. It's called "They Simply Don't Think." It ran in the Post. And it's on the card as Lee Weber versus voters. There's what Lee Weber says. Dr. Albert Schweitzer, a pastor, doctor, surgeon, and scholar, and 1952 Nobel laureate, Nobel laureate, when being interviewed in London, was asked by a reporter, "Doctor, what's wrong with mankind today?" The great doctor was silent a moment, and then he said, "They simply don't think. They don't think." After seeing recent results of our local senatorial elections, coupled with what's happening in the U.S. presidential election, and the way we have handled the pandemic here on Guam, the good doctor could have easily been looking well into the future when he made that statement. Speaking of local senatorial elections, I continue to find it extremely puzzling why people vote senators back into office when those same senators have failed to deliver what they have promised, or more importantly, what is really needed to continually improve and move our community and island forward. These same senators have also failed so miserably, going silent in the face of a pandemic for nearly 2 full weeks back in March, never finding the courage and responsibility to challenge and openly discuss repeated gubernatorial dictates, while at the same time not aggressively and appropriately addressing public health, public safety, education, and the failing economy brought on by unnecessary administrative dictates. Then you look at what is happening in the U.S. mainland communities and the literal battles in the streets and senseless destruction of innocent businesses by looters who belong in prison for their actions. And add to this our elected officials who are willing to punish individual citizens and business people with terribly restrictive pandemic rules, while at the same time allowing others to range freely in large groups. Add to this the fact that 9 months into this pandemic, we learned from the head of the governor's medical group that the Department of Public Health and Social Service is running 5 days behind on notifying people who have tested positive for Wuhan virus. Any thinking person must ask, why? They have changed leadership positions at DPHSS multiple times, but have yet to find someone who can actually take the reins of power there and lead this community's primary health organization and this community into a safer position. Under the governor's $10,000 death benefit for Wuhan virus-related fatalities, to date, the government has accumulated some $840,000 in debt to be paid to those families. But, you know, Governor Leon Guerrero said, it's the least she could do. You know, you almost need an electronic microscope or some really, really minute measuring devices to figure out what the least the governor is, what the least she can do is, because she sinks to new depths every day. Yet, for some unknown reason, we cannot afford to hire competent leadership at Department of Public Health and Social Services and enough staff who can ensure that those who have tested positive for the virus can be notified immediately, quarantined, and cared for. In so doing, the administration would be protecting their families and friends from becoming exposed and thereby spreading the virus further throughout our community. This ties in nicely with the Post editorial. Even though we know where the virus is located, we're not telling because DPHSS is getting an opinion from the Attorney General. Where are the priorities that are needed to truly protect the health and safety of our people? They certainly do not exist in Adelup. And as Dr. Albert Schweitzer said so many years ago, when asked what the greatest problem facing mankind was, they don't think. They simply don't think. So I'll add that to my post-mortem of the election results, in addition to what I said before I started reading this letter. The electorate doesn't think. However, there are very few things that, well, let me see how I want to say this. They are the electorate, and if they don't make the right decisions, we can't pack them up and ship them off and bring in another crop. They are the only electorate that we're going to have. So what the burden lies on people who would run for office to make sure that people do think before they go to the polls. Now, of course, can I see if I can do, yeah. I see that as part of my job. I pat myself on the back here, making people think. There is something called critical thinking, where instead of looking at a problem and making an instant and sure grasp for the obvious, a critical thinker will examine all aspects of the problem and come up with understandings that may have escaped others and solutions that may have escaped others. So if we have a non-thinking electorate, this puts a greater burden on the candidate. And of course, my solution for legislative shortfalls is a part-time legislature. I think that if we had people who had real existence in the community instead of professional politicians at the legislature, we would have more public engagement. I'm afraid that an awful lot of the public suffers from learned helplessness. What difference does it make? We put in new people and we get the same thing every time. So much for Lee Weber versus the people. Next on my card is Trump versus the mail. Trump versus the mail. And we had an election on Tuesday, and there are a lot of questions arising from the from the election and for the vote counts. And Donald Trump, true to his usual style, has made some shotgun-type statements about election fraud, stealing the election, et cetera, et cetera. And as is often the case, when people consider what Donald Trump has to say, they do so with a large grain of salt handy. However, I think that he's on the right track by looking at every single possibility to raise a challenge for any of the election results that seem to be a little bit questionable, regardless of who it is that's asking the questions or who's trying to tell you, like with the laptop, just move along. There's nothing to see here. So, and critical thinking, moving away from this election and looking at trying to frame an issue that would be true for all elections, I ask this question: which is more important, to have an election that is more burdensome on the voter, but provides nearly unquestionable results, or to ease the burden on the voter, knowing that the easing of the burden on the voter is very possibly going to question the results of the election? Now, I come down on the first one. And the reason I say that is that the elections in a democratic republic, which is we are, we're not a democracy, we are a republic, but we elect the officers in our republic. And when people lose confidence in our elections, let's see here. We got a break coming up here, so I'm going to come back to Trump in the mail right after this short break.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you wear a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific grows with branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Contact tracing is key to containing COVID-19. That's why we're introducing the Guam COVID Alert app. According to Oxford University, for every 100 to 200 downloads of this app, 100 infections can be prevented and 1 life can be saved. Help save a life. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download the app from the App Store or Google Play now. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Charleston, yeah.
The Roaring 20s?
There you go. So, elections are, the bedrock of a democracy. And when people lose trust in the process of elections, they lose faith in their democracy. And the whole thing can unravel rather quickly. So, I've offered this comparison before in the criminal justice area or in the justice area courts. Let's hypothesize that we could have a system that always provides the correct results in our courts, but it's an invisible system. Maybe it's a bank of computers and some keys and stuff, but the results are always 100% accurate. Let's call that situation A. Situation B is the way we do things now. And situation B is different from situation A because there are apparently fair procedures. People watch everything that's going on and they say, yeah, I maybe don't like the result, but the procedures were fair. Apparently fair procedures trumps absolutely correct results. And the same thing would be true with elections, that it's absolutely essential that elections are apparently fair, appear to be fair. So I'm not going to go into all of the different states and the controversies going on, but you know, there's enough out there to say, yeah, it just doesn't seem right. Now maybe it's some wrongdoing, maybe not, but it doesn't seem right. And the problem here, the explanation for most of these things is mail-in ballots. If I were able to, I would say henceforth, no more mail-in ballots. And of course, I've gotten into this before, but I would hope that people that select our government officials are engaged and pay some attention to what they're doing and committed to the point that they don't mind, you know, getting up from their lazy boy and going down to the polls on election day and actually marking a piece of paper or pushing a button or something like that. So the fact that it's easier to mail in a ballot means, to me, is a false equivalency. It shouldn't come into the picture at all. But there's so much room for chicanery with this bail-in ballot thing that I don't see how it could ever be done in such a manner that when it's all over, people would say, yeah, it was fair. It was fair. And I've made the example before. Let's say we had mail-in ballots here. So the word goes out, hey, come over to Bob's. Bob's having an election day party. He's barbecuing. He's going to have plenty of beer and poo-poo, stuff like that. Yeah, really? What's the catch? No catch. Just come over and bring your ballot. You get to the front door and one of Bob's minions says, just give me that ballot. I'll take care of it for you. Mark it up. Make sure it goes into the box. That's going to happen. There's no way you can stop it from happening. Now, in the United States, we use what's called the secret ballot. And the secret ballot has been generally used in the U.S. only since 1890, which is relatively recently. Before that, the voter would come to the polls and he would tell somebody, I'm voting for Washington, or I'm voting for Adams, or I'm voting for Jefferson, or whatever. And of course, that's not a good system. But it's easier than handing out all these ballots and helping people that have a hard time reading and everything. So should we go back to that? Just have people come down to the polling places and say, I want Michael San Nicolas, or I want Robert. No, we don't want to do that because it's not going to look like we're getting a fair result. And the same thing happens with this mail-in stuff. So if I could make the ruling, I really should be able to, don't you think, out there in our international radio listening audience, I'd say no more mail-in ballots, period. And I would make one small exception for what we used to call absentee voting. That is that if you knew for sure you were going to be in East Jesus on the election day, you could go to our election commission, sign a declaration under penalty of perjury, and they would mail you the ballot and you could mail it back. But the rule would have to be, if that ballot is not in the hands of election officials on the day before election, it don't count. Because that's where all of the problems have come in here. In Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania law created by the Pennsylvania legislature says it's got to be in the polling place at 8 p.m. But in Pennsylvania, they elect their Supreme Court, and they're all Democrats. So some smart lawyer in Pennsylvania petitions a court in Pennsylvania that says, well, you know, this Wuhan virus, we've got to extend the deadline. So the Supreme Court extended the deadline. Now, I've gone through this before as to how the Supreme Court gets involved, but I'll just take a minute now. If we're to look at Article 1, I guess it's Article 2. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled. So the state appoints in a manner decided by the legislature. Okay, let's break for that big halftime show, and we'll come back to Trump versus the mail.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Making plans for day one. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President-elect Joe Biden making plans to hit the ground running in January.
Including reversing a number of President Trump's policies. We've confirmed Biden plans to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, reinstate DACA, repeal President Trump's travel ban targeting majority Muslim countries, and rejoin the World Health Organization, noting that while the WHO isn't perfect, it's essential to coordinating a global response to the pandemic, which is the transition team's biggest focus right now. But with the balance of the Senate still in question, there's a chance big plans will be checked at the door.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich, Mr. Biden announcing a coronavirus transition advisory board on Monday.
The process must also be grounded in science and fully transparent so the American people can have every confidence that any approved vaccine is safe and effective.
Pfizer reporting Monday that its phase 3 human trials have shown its vaccine candidate is 90% effective against the coronavirus. But the Trump team insisting the election isn't decided yet. Senior Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller telling Fox's The Story with Martha McCallum.
I believe that as we reevaluate and go through, whether it's in the recount process or as we go through the constitutionality of some of the elections that were held at the state level, that absolutely some of these states could change. And before they're certified, we need to make sure that we're certifying the correct winner.
The campaign filing several lawsuits Monday, including one in Michigan that includes sworn statements from several election workers who say they saw ballot fraud taking place. Attorney General Barr in a memo instructing U.S. attorneys to investigate any substantial allegation of voter fraud, but saying the department has not yet concluded that voting irregularities have impacted the outcome of any of the elections. The New York Times reports the head of the Justice Department's Election Security Division has resigned over the Barr memo. America is listening to Fox News.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you wear a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank was centered Rosebud branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
The Senate returned for its lame duck session on Monday. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer echoing Joe Biden's call for unity.
President-elect Joe Biden has told the country that it's time to come together and heal, to unify once again, to fight not our political opponents but our common enemies, disease and poverty and injustice. There's no person better suited to the task than the former vice president.
But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell found that to be hypocritical.
Let's not have any lectures. No lectures about how the president should immediately, cheerfully accept preliminary election results from the same characters who just spent 4 years refusing to accept the validity of the last election.
Congress has several tasks facing it, including extending government spending authority, which is currently scheduled to expire a month from now, and possibly another coronavirus stimulus package. The Secretary of Defense has been fired.
In his final message to the forces, outgoing Defense Secretary Mark Esper urged the military to remain apolitical and continue honoring the Constitution. After 18 months on the job, President Trump's fourth defense chief said creating Space Force and rebuilding America's nuclear arsenal are the highlights, as well as standing up to China and Russia abroad and dealing with the, quote, charged political atmosphere at home. In a separate letter to the president, Esper said he accepted the decision to replace him 38 years after rising from West Point cadet to assuming the Pentagon's top job. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
The Federal Aviation Administration says it has entered the final stages of reviewing the safety changes made to the Boeing 737 MAX jetliners, which have been grounded worldwide for more than a year and a half after 2 overseas crashes that killed nearly 350 people. A source says approval could come within days. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
The 2020 Census of Guam extends its warmest appreciation and thank you to the people of Guam. Your participation helped ensure our island will receive the federal funding it needs for the next 10 years. Together, we made a difference.
도모 아리가또 고자이마시타. 협조해 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. 谢谢.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. And undang kuluna si Jules Maasi.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are, second half of Tall Tales after that big halftime show that we've all come to know and love so much. That means we are now in the second half of Tall Tales, and I'm still with Donald Trump in the mail, but during the halftime show, I was able to take a peek at Facebook, and I noticed we have some folks on Facebook in our Facebook comments engaging in a little bit of critical thinking, which is exactly what I was talking about a little earlier, and which is one of the things that is sponsored by Tall Tales. I'm not here to come up and dazzle you with stories like 2 + 2 = 4, in case you didn't know that. Or the alphabet has 26 letters.
And we have Joe's laugh.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes in handy because of my great sense of humor, right?
Oh, this one.
Wrong sound. Thanks, Jose. Wrong sound effect. So Deanne from Minnesota chimed in here. So she says she's a first-time listener to this program from Minnesota. So Minnesota is a great state. You know, there's a lot of intellectual opportunity in Minnesota, being as how it's so close to Wisconsin and all. Yeah. And the ground rules here, Deanne, are the name of the program is Tall Tales. So part of the reason for that name is that the host, yourself, myself, never lets the truth interfere with the telling of a good story. But I had a situation here about 6 months ago where I was being facetious and someone took me seriously. So in order to avoid that, when I'm being facetious, and Jose knows I'm being facetious, he does this. Yeah, so when you hear that horn beeping, you know I'm exaggerating or being facetious or something along those lines. So that might just make things a little clearer for you as you become a tailgater. Talgaiter, tailgater. And here's what Leanne from Minnesota says. Honest question. First timer to this program from Minnesota. Question. Do people really buy into this propaganda? This propaganda, you know, that's interesting. You know, propaganda, you mean the truth? Propaganda. And do the majority of listeners call it the Wuhan virus? Yeah, the majority of the listeners do call it the Wuhan virus. So after Deanne posed her question, there's a fairly long thread. It's really interesting. We go from there to Jose Martinez.
Who?
The Jose Martinez. Okay. Yeah, the very Jose Martinez, who says, your honesty includes an assertion that this is propaganda. That's just rich. You know, it takes a lot to refer to the content of Tall Tales as propaganda. And then Andrew Camacho comes along and says, from the beginning of the pandemic, we were diligent at being politically incorrect by calling the virus its original Wuhan virus. Deanne says, thank you for replying. I'm hoping to get some insight. And then Andrew comes back and says, you know, it's like Spanish flu, which originated in Kansas, but everybody knows it as a Spanish flu. Andrew Camacho goes on to say, welcome, we are tailgaters, or the Tall Tales show with Judge Robert Klitzkie. And then he goes on to say, absolutely. And then Jose comes back and says, I am admittedly on the, Deanne comes back and says, I am admittedly on the outside looking in, and it sounds like propaganda to me. Jose comes back and says, give a clear example of propaganda, which doesn't mean you disagree with the message. This is not state media at all. Andrew comes back and says, if you listen regularly, you'll find no nonsense wisdom from Bob and most of his callers. Let me read that one again, Jose. If you listen regularly, you will find no nonsense wisdom from Bob and most of his callers. Yeah. Very good. Jose has a real good grasp of reality, doesn't he? And then Deanne comes back and says, Jose Martinez, I don't think it has to be state media to be so. Do you? And what she's saying is propaganda can come from somewhere other than state media. I'm not so sure of that. I think propaganda probably does, almost by definition, come from state media. But I'm going to reserve on that one. And then Jose comes back and says, in a broad sense, any opinion can be labeled the pejorative that is propaganda. However, opinion ought not to be brushed with such a broad stroke. It's opinion radio at the core, driven by the host. However, anyone can call in with any opinion, including contrary opinion. Yeah, I've explained it before, Deanne, that, you know, we believe in expression and freedom of speech, et cetera, and anybody who wants to call in and disagree with me after listening to my explanation has an absolute right to be wrong here on Tall Tales, and I wouldn't interfere with that right for anything. And Andrew Camacho comes back and says, you are welcome. We are a friendly bunch, spirited at times, but we speak the truth at all times, except when we dabble in some good-natured humor. And then Jose comes back and says, I'm interested in how you came across this program, especially up there in Minnesota. Do they have computers in Minnesota? I guess they do, yeah.
Shortwave radio.
Yeah. And then Jose Martin, as you were, Deanne says, back to Jose, wait a second here. Jose Martinez, so to celebrate free speech, I see your opinion. Thank you. I find it interesting, this program. It is different from my perspective as a Chamorro. So, no, Chamorro, si Diane. Adzina Anmo, Diane? Hadzi familiamo? To Minnesota, Gui? Okay. I can appreciate listening to his prop views. I think prop is short for propaganda. Well, if at least it's listenable, I guess the battle's not completely lost.
Well, at least I hope the propaganda works.
Yeah. And then Jose comes back and says, let's see, Jose Martinez says, try to tune into Ray Gibson when possible. And then Andrew says, our Bob is not known to humble over issues that cause most to stumble. His senses are keen and cutting through a smokescreen.
This is where you introduce Andrew as the poet laureate.
How does that remain on so humble? And Andrew is the poet laureate of Tall Tales, Deanne, and he's touched on one of my real strong points, and that is humility. And I just have to let you know that I'm very proud of my humility. Okay, then Jose sends one to Deanne. It's always good to expand one's comfort level. I learn a lot from those whom I may initially disagree with. The ability to freely speak and speak freely is very important. And then Jose says, expand beyond, that is. Well, a nice set of trialogue, I guess, Jose and Deanne and the poet laureate of Tall Tales. Very interesting. Okay, so back to work. Trump in the mail. So I regardless of the results, and I've already tipped my hat here that I think that the chances of Trump being able to pull this election out with his legal challenges, it's not there. At least at best, chances are slim to none. However, what he's doing is a good thing because he is about the only person that would do such a thing, to challenge all of these questionable results And if he does, and it turns out that none of them or most of them are meritless, then we can be sure that our election system works. It's better to do that than to let several controversies fester and give those on the Trump side the opportunity to say, well, you stole the election from us. So by Trump challenging all these questionable elections, we'll learn a lot. And when we're all finished, we should have results that no one can question. So for that, I applaud Donald Trump. Having been a Trumpster from the beginning anyhow, it's not that hard for me to applaud Donald Trump. Okay, so and to wrap it up, the sooner we do away with this mail-in ballot nonsense, the better off we will be. The sooner we decide that if the votes are not in the hands of the polling places on the day before election, they don't count, the better off we will be.
Bob, just real quick, we had a phone caller who was asking if you had a cover that looked like the Amazing Kreskin's cover and could predict the outcome of the election.
The Amazing who?
Kreskin? I remember, what's his name, Johnny Carson, predicting things with this big turban on his head.
Well, he was not the Amazing Kreskin. He was the Amazing Karnak.
Oh, Karnak. Who is Kreskin?
Beats the hell out of me. Yeah. Yeah, Karnak.
Karnak, there you go.
Karnak the Magnificent. So Karnak the Magnificent would hold an envelope up to his forehead, and he'd give you the answer. And then he would take the envelope and open it up.
And read the question.
Read the question.
That's it.
Karnak. And he had a great big, yeah. You know, being a horse and tall tales, I have a lot of talents in addition to the pride in my humility, but I never had the ability that the great Karnak has. And I didn't even attempt to predict the results of the election. I did make it known that I wasn't going to vote for any incumbents. And I did mention, let's see, 3 people or 4 people that I thought merited a vote. But that's as far as I went. I didn't prognosticate, and I probably won't start on that. Okay, next item on the card here is the burn versus the legislature. And this is a story that ran in the Daily News yesterday. DOA director, Wuhan virus reporting is faulty. A law enacted in May that mandates monthly Wuhan virus expense reports hasn't been followed, and few senators have asked for the reports despite all but one of them voting for and overriding the governor's veto of the legislation. Now, the governor, after they overrode her letter, sent a nasty letter, and I'm not going to take the time to read it. I might later on present a summary of it, but for once, I really agree with the governor. And I made a comment to Ray the other day on the Ray Gibson show when he asked about this particular bill and the story that the PDN ran, that everybody voted for it. Everybody voted to override the veto, but no one asked, hey, where are these reports that we thought were so important? So a couple of important points here. If you look at Bill 333-35, and hold it up here, you'll notice that all 15 members of the legislature are shown there, and the line is below the last name on the list. Now, people get confused by that because every bill that passes the legislature has the names of all 15 senators on it. So people think, well, gosh, if it's got all 15 senators, I guess they all must have sponsored it. Not so. It's only the names above the line that are recognized as sponsors. Everybody else is shown just as the principle that it was enacted by the whole legislature, regardless who voted for it or who voted against it. So all 15 voted for it, and it is an extremely sloppy piece of work. No surprise. It enacts 9 sections, including the obligatory severability clause. And it's not codified, therefore it's not meant to have any lasting value. And it requires all of these reports. As an example, Section 2, a Magitlahin Guahan or her designated representative, you don't need to say that. When you name a public official, it implies that that person's deputies and assistants can carry out the mandate. May hire temporary employees or temporarily redirect existing employees to implement and expedite federal and local programs related to U.S. Public Law 116-136 and to process tax refunds on an expedited basis. Well, this is like the football coach getting the team together in the locker room before the game. Says, okay, this is how we're going to win this game. Okay, you ready? Score more touchdowns than the other side. And all of the players are, whoa, I'd have never thought of that in a million years. And that's basically what this bill does. Section 3, within 5 working days, working days for whom? For the government of Guam? You know, you might have to wait for a whole year for some government of Guam employees to put in 5 working days. Or maybe fire department who works 12 days a month. Within 5 working days after the enactment of this act, a Magahagan Guahan or her designated representative shall reasonably attempt to execute all necessary memoranda of understanding and memoranda of agreement between the United States and Guam and establish all necessary programs to effect the provisions of Public Law 116-136. Imagahagan Guahan and every director shall submit to a legislature in Guahan a copy of any agreement signed on behalf of the agency or the government within 24 hours of signing on behalf of Guam and shall submit a copy of the fully executed agreement within 24 hours. This is a classic example of putting words on paper that mean absolutely nothing. The governor or her designated representative shall reasonably attempt to execute all necessary memorandum of understanding and memorandum of agreement between Guam and the United States. Completely meaningless. Do you need to tell that to the governor? Governor, before you fry the eggs, make sure you crack the eggs. Don't try to... I mean, that's basically what they're doing here. Teaching the governor how to suck eggs. Like, she wouldn't know in order to do this. And if they didn't put the 5-day requirement in there, she might think, oh, I've got all kinds of time here. I'm not going to hurry. And then if the governor says, I'm not going to do this, what result? What happens? Nothing. There's nothing in there that, there's no default provision. There's nothing that says, if you don't do this, Governor, we're going to cut off one of your husband's fingers for every day that you're late. Yeah.
I was just horrified for a second.
Yeah. And then Section 4, the Department of Revenue and Taxation is authorized. Well, who is this guy, Department of Revenue and Taxation? Is authorized to implement any procedures necessary to implement the federal economic impact payments or cash assistance programs, and implementing the cash assistance procedures for 2020 recovery rebates under Public Law 116-136 shall not allow any abatement, attachment, or garnishment of the economic impact payments except for child support. So what they're trying to say here is that the Department of Revenue and Taxation can't garnish those payments, which I don't think they could anyhow. But it's just easier to do this. Section 5, through Imagahagan Guahan, through Executive Order 2020-07, required employers who reduce their workforce through employee terminations, layoffs, furloughs, or reductions in hours, etc., to report such reductions to the Department of Labor in a form prescribed by the Director in preparation for the implementation of the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Insurance Program. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm glad they put that in the bill. To assist the Department of Labor in collecting the required information, the Department of Revenue and Taxation, here's a couple of guys. One's called Department of Labor, the other one's called Department of Revenue and Taxation. I think each of those departments has a director, and you could probably figure out what their names are if you tried over there at the legislature. Says they may deny renewal of business licenses for any employer certified by Department of Labor to be non-compliant with said reporting requirement, provided that such denial is authorized only for the period of time that an employer fails to complete the reporting requirement. DRT shall not be authorized to deny renewals of business licenses beyond December 31. I think I could probably figure out what they're trying to say here, but you know, it's one of those things where the first sentence should have been, well, to make a short story long. And then it goes on to say, notwithstanding the administrative adjudication law, the Department of Labor shall utilize any existing program or create separate rules for the implementation of the unemployment insurance program authorized in Public Law 116. Said rules shall be posted on the DOL website and shall be transmitted to the Speaker within 15 days of the enactment of this act. Okay, so we're coming up to the seventh inning stretch here. Maybe we should do the seventh inning stretch in Minnesota today. I don't know what the name of the ballpark that the Twins play in, do you?
No idea. Is there snow on the ground? I think so.
Well, let's see, it's November. I'd be surprised if there isn't. You know, they only have 2 seasons up there in Minneapolis. Winter and the 4th of July. Yeah. Back home again in Indiana. I've told you this before, but I can't resist, Jose. You know, I've been to some really exotic places in my life. Well, I've been to India. I've been to Indonesia. I've even been to Indiana.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
Okay, seventh inning stretch coming to you from the home park of the Minnesota Twins. Maybe our correspondent in Minnesota could tell me what the name of that ballpark is. So, but instead of having the home stretch at Wrigley Field today, we've moved it to Minnesota. Although I have a feeling, given that it's November in the Twin Cities, hockey would be more appropriate than baseball. All right, so let's see. I got somebody waiting in the green room here. It's Martinez waiting in the green room. Good afternoon, Martinez.
Good afternoon, Senator. Do you hear me loud and clear?
5 by 5.
It's called Target Field. Martinez is a huge Minnesota Twins fan since his mother's from that state. He's been a diehard Twins fan since 1965, win or lose. Target Field. Target stores. Dayton. There used to be Dayton's. Governor Dayton from Minnesota, the famous Dayton store in Minnesota. Now it's called Target. So they're sponsored. It's called Target Field. It's an outdoor field. It's almost 10 years old now. Not bad. But here's why Martinez code.
Before we leave Target Field, Martinez.
Target Field.
Before we leave it.
Minnesota Twins play.
Before we leave it. There are those who would attempt to fancy it up a little bit by giving it a French pronunciation and refer to it as Target Field. But go on with your story.
Is he in the green room? Bob?
Say again?
Is he in the green room now?
Who?
Frenchie?
No, Frenchie is not. Frenchie didn't even sign in to Facebook today.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, here's why Martinez called. At exactly 0934 this morning, our Carl called up the opposition. He yapped for 20 minutes. As usual, he talked about his private life, talked about his wife and his mother, how he helped them during their bad health, then talked about himself, went on and on, talked about how he's an expert in COVID, how he likes to read, and that stuff. He yapped for 20 minutes. Patty had to stop him. Patty show, because she only had 6 minutes left in her show to get the news in. Our Carl going to the opposition, Bob, had to let you know. Talking for 20 minutes and wanted to go on longer. Did they ever talk for 20 minutes or longer on your show?
I think probably the only person that gets to talk for 20 minutes or longer on our show is me.
Okay, but he went for 20 minutes on the opposition, the Patty show, 0934 this morning. Like I said, he would have went longer, but she only had 6 minutes left. I had to cut him off. Just to let you know, Bob, okay? Our Carl talking to the opposition 20 minutes. Okay, Bob?
All right, Martinez.
Okay.
Thanks for the information. Okay, and I got somebody else waiting in the green. It's our, believe it or not, it's our Carl. Our Carl, the most dangerous man in the room.
Someone Karen'd our Carl.
Yeah, someone Karen'd our Carl. And our Carl is so dangerous that there's someone even playing man-to-man defense with our Carl. So what can you tell me today, our Carl?
Wow. What can I say?
I guess you better, whatever you got to say, you better make it.
Thanks a lot, Martinez. Man, this was supposed to be a secret that I was going over to the other side. I was like a double agent or something.
Gathering critical intelligence from the other side. So whatever you're going to say, our Carl, whatever you're going to say, I guess you better say it quick because the clock is running.
I was chuckling when he was talking. I am a little bit predictable, but I always enjoy what Martinez has to say. You know, he's got quite a knowledge of Guam political history. I don't know where he got it all from. I think I've been told he spent a lot of time in the law library, and he's pretty knowledgeable. So I always, when he calls in, I always sit and listen and see what he has to say, because he's definitely worth paying attention to what he says.
If he didn't have a middle name by now, I would give him the middle name of Britannica, because his knowledge is so encyclopedic.
He knows like months and years and who was elected, and I don't know how he files all that stuff. But anyway, I chuckled at his kind of pokes at me a little bit. It's true. I tend to be a little bit predictable sometimes. But anyway, I just wish he didn't snitch on me like that. You know, now I can't be a double agent anymore.
Well, you need to develop a pseudonym, R. Carl. Pass yourself off as
Yeah, when I go over there, maybe I can do that. Disguise my voice.
Sean Connery or
Call yourself Martinez.
Martinez.
Or some variation of Martinez.
Yeah. Call yourself
Martinez too.
Call yourself
something.
Martinez. That'll set him back. Yeah.
I can't follow his.
Then people will say, "What is the producer for Tall Tales doing calling Patty?" Anyhow, go on with your story, R. Carl.
Yeah, I just called in because I just was chuckling and laughing when Martinez was talking about my call in. Yeah, I called in this morning because I just wanted to add the they were discussing about the virus, this Wuhan virus, and I just wanted to add the other side of the issue, which is we're not really talking about strengthening our immune system, and I've talked about it a lot of times before. But anyway, that's why I called to be transparent, since transparency is in the spirit of Michelle Armenta. I'll be transparent.
I don't know what it was that you told Patty this morning in your 20-minute call, but it will never be recovered because that video will self-destruct 10 seconds after you hung up.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bob, that's it. I just wanted to mention that, to confess my crime I committed.
Is the word you're looking for apostasy, R. Carl?
Yeah, that's another version.
All right, well, go and sin no more. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll try and not make it too habitual, calling to the competition.
All right, hold on.
What was interesting was Martinez was speaking in the third person as if he really didn't want to do what he was doing.
Could be, yeah, but, well, he has a certain loyalty to Tall Tales. I think maybe he felt he was duty-bound. All right, back to, what is the name of this one? The Burn versus the legislature. Section 6, notwithstanding any other provision law, any funds that may be subject to legislative authorization or appropriation for expenditures pursuant to Section 501, Title 5 of Public Law 116 shall not be expended, earmarked, or set aside without a legislative appropriation and are not subject to transfer by Imagahaga. Well, guys in the legislature, if you listen to Tall Tales, you would know about Wong versus Kamina. Wong versus Kamina was decided by the district court in 1977, and it says that because of the language in the Organic Act dealing with appropriations from the national government, any appropriation from the national government that doesn't have any direction as to the legislature's involvement and doesn't require matching funds is not subject to legislative appropriation. I suppose that's why whoever the scrivener is over there at the legislature, what teenager they asked to draft this one up, said, notwithstanding any other provision law, any funds that may be subject to legislative appropriation, that may be, if you don't know, don't put it in your bill. So the governor took a certain amount of glee, I think, in calling their attention to Wong versus Kamina. And then Section 7, the governor shall keep a full account of all Wuhan virus expenses funded by either local or federal funds and shall submit a report to the Speaker within 20 days of the close of each calendar month. Report shall include a clear description of the source of funds, transferred funds, lapsed funds. Now, this is what lapsed funds means. Let's say there's an appropriation to Department XYZ for this fiscal year for $25,000. And on the 10th of November, Department XYZ has spent $12,000. How much are the lapsed funds? None. There are no lapsed funds until the end of the fiscal year. The end of the fiscal year means that funds that out of that appropriation that haven't been spent lapse, which means they disappear. They're not available during the next fiscal year. That's what lapsed funds means, everywhere but at the legislature. Now, what they're talking about here, I suppose, could be categorized as anticipated lapses. Same fact situation. If only half of the money had been spent, you could say, well, anticipated lapses here are half of that appropriation. But the executive could spend it all the next day. So this is an incredibly poorly worded bill. Section 8, the public auditor shall conduct semi-annual audits of expenditures on Guam. You had to put the on Guam in there because he might be going to Saipan and Rhoda, auditing funds of a truck. Yeah. Public auditor shall conduct semi-annual audits of all expenditures on Guam associated with Public Law 116 for compliance with all applicable local and federal laws, and may require information from government agencies or a magahaga necessary to complete the audits. The magahaga may allocate funds provided by the federal government to the office. You know, once again, the public auditor wouldn't know what to do, you know, unless Tina wrote him a little note. Oh, public auditor, by the way, would you do annual audits of these expenditures? And then Section 9, the obligatory severability clause. This is a classic case of a waste of time and effort. Words on paper. How many pages is this bill? 4 pages that has absolutely no effect, which of course was recognized by the members of the legislature because they didn't even ask for any of the reports that they thought were so important. Time went by and they didn't even ask.
You said all their names are on it?
Yep.
I'm curious if they were consulted.
Well, that was the first thing I looked at, and the second to the last name, the penultimate name, we go from Amanda Shelton, that name, and then Jose Pido Terlaje. So the one whose name shall never pass our lips was the 14th co-sponsor. So if she co-sponsored it, I guess they must have consulted her. Otherwise, and if they hadn't, we'd know it by now. Yeah. So this article goes into some of the efforts that weren't made. 14 of 15 senators voted to pass Bill 333-35. 14 of the 15 senators then overrode the governor's veto to make it Public Law 3586. Few senators, however, followed up with the governor's office about the reporting requirement in the months after it was enacted, and no reports had been filed. Questions were emailed to all senators October 19 asking if they requested the reports the law required from the governor and if they are fully informed about how money is spent during the pandemic. All of the senator's office, except Senator Luis Muñoz, confirmed they received the questions, but not all senators responded. Luis Muñoz didn't. Why should she? She's not running for re-election. She's a lame duck. Okay, we're getting down close to the end of the program here. We're going to take a short break and we'll launch down the home stretch, and I'm going to have a little help on the home stretch from none other than our Fred.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont or call 646-1463.
Hofady, this is Kayla from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So we instantly relocate from Target Field in Minneapolis to Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky for the home stretch. Churchill Downs, Kentucky Derby, home stretch, which means that I got about 10 more minutes of Tall Tales till Jose and I start a 24-hour period of suffering. There will be no Tall Tales. Tall Tales. Today was a Marine Corps birthday. It was a good day for me, being a Marine and all. Tomorrow should be a good day also. You know, it's Veterans Day and everything, and I should be able to celebrate, but how can I celebrate if I can't do Tall Tales? And what about all of the tailgaters deprived of their daily dose of Tall Tales? But if it's for the good of the country, I'll make the sacrifice, Jose. All right, so I've got our Fred here waiting in the green room. Good afternoon, our Fred.
Hey, RAG, how you doing? Happy Veterans Day. You're a veteran, right?
I am indeed, yeah.
Happy Veterans Day. We are going to miss you tomorrow. But, you know, I wanted to bring up, you got on the Guam PDN on Facebook, you already have the draconian public health laws coming out, which the governor appointed, directive, which is the fines, the individual fines and the business fines. Although they had a public hearing, and some of the senators and also the public that was on the so-called Zoom public hearing voiced their concerns that, you know, with how tough things are, instead of fining people, that's not going to get, disciplined by the people of Guam. Forcing it through fines and all. But today, if you look on Facebook, even though these sentiments were shared that it's the wrong thing to do, it's still going through with public health, and they're just devising how the law will be stated and
well, you know, our
fines
Fred
are going to be implemented. Yeah.
Our Fred, I got some information from the governor's office, and when a couple of the staffers came to the governor and said, "Governor, there's some flack about charging these fines. There are several people that don't think we should charge these fines. What should we do about those people?" And the governor, of course, said, "Off with their heads." Yeah, go on, our friend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did they really say that? Wow.
Yeah.
I missed that part. I'm always missing the off with their heads part.
Yeah, well, you know, the red crane in Alice in Wonderland, that was her solution to every problem, and our governor has picked it up.
That's a big disservice. You know, I did talk to some senators today and brought that up, that this directive, it's coming up tomorrow, I think, and how the law is going to be stated and written and all that and implemented. So, which brings in a question. So, what about all the public sentiments that have been shared? What was that just for a formality, and that was it? And I asked the senators that, why don't you step in and do something about it? They said they can't vote on this. It's through executive order. And
did you talk to Tello Taitigui? Is that your source of information?
Yes, she is one of them. Yes.
Yeah, that figures.
Not the only one, but she's one of them.
Yeah.
And that's a shame because the people of Guam are going to be fined, and these elected officials, including the governor, is forgetting who elected them. The people of Guam elected them, and the people of Guam are being fined. That's absurd. Instead of showing compassion and care, they're showing more draconian measures than like where Russia, the Red Army coming in, or China, the Red Army, or something. Very big disservice to the people of Guam.
Well, the biggest disservice is what those senators told you. Now, I could make an argument in favor of fines, because you enact legislation like that or executive orders like that, not because you want people to pay the fine, it's you want to impact their behavior, so that people would say, I don't want to pay that fine, so I'm not going to do it. That I could understand. I can't understand a senator being so dense as to say there's nothing we could do about it. It's an executive order.
It's strange how they got voted in and they're still using the same excuse.
Well, I think Lee Weber really called it, didn't he?
Yeah, and when I read Lee's article about they just don't think, I'll say it one more time because it's twice, right? The scientist said they just don't think.
Right.
It reminded me of the Dunning-Kruger's effect, which is kind of maybe along the same lines.
I wonder if the person whose name shall never pass our lips is a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club. Our friend.
Yeah, we got to nominate. I mean, it's already. I mean, the qualifications are there.
What's the one thing about the Dunning-Kruger's Club?
You don't know that you're in it.
Yeah.
That's our Fred educated us to that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring it to light. This is really not right for the public, for the people of Guam that elected them. That's just wrong. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'll let you bring it home.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, our friend.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Bob.
Thanks for calling in.
Right.
Here.
Okay, Bob. Thanks.
Yeah. So here we are. 4 more minutes to go, and I think I've pretty much exhausted the Facebook comments. Let me see if I've got any other pithy comments here on Facebook. Andrew says, Happy Veterans Day, Bob, and all our fine men and women who served our country. May God bless you. And Frank Ariarty says, thank you, Andrew. Let's see what else I've got people saying here. We got that scammer in there again, huh? Is there some way I can block that? I guess I got to do it.
Yeah, for all of those who are getting it, just try to get on that person's. You can report it and block it also at the same time.
Yeah. I'll do that tonight. Let's see. Makes it kind of hard to go through the Facebook comments, doesn't it? Dennis Mace. You don't want to cross Dennis Mace. You know why? If he's angry, you know what he'll do to you?
He'll get a face full of
mace. Yeah. Dennis Mace. So my cousin says Trump was so egotistical to admit defeat. What was, I think what he means to say, too egotistical to not admit defeat. And then Dennis Mace's comment was, you mean like Gore and Hillary?
I don't think Hillary has conceded yet.
No, she never. In fact, I heard her say during the last campaign that she'd run for president and beat him again. Well, she got more popular votes, you know. Somebody says here, I didn't vote for Tello. Oh, and there was one comment here. I can't remember who put it up here, but said, I voted for Ken, but I didn't like about half the people that he endorsed. Now, that's something I forgot about when I did my analysis. You remember, Ken attempted to have two different roles in the election. He was a candidate, and then he was sort of a pack for other candidates endorsing other people, including people from the opposite party. And I haven't really given it much thought, but I have a feeling that that really hurt him. Because, you know, if you're running for office, people are looking for a couple of things. One, they're looking for the common touch. They're looking for someone that can relate to them, that doesn't think that they're takilu and, you know, too good to talk with the voters. But then on the other hand, they're looking for somebody that's maybe a little bit sharper than they are. So it's kind of a hard balance to hit. But then Ken comes along and says, vote for me, because I'm right out there. I'm trying to change things. I'm trying to make things better. And besides that, I'm so sharp here, I can tell you who else you should vote for beside me. And that may really have worked against him. It's the only thing that I can think of that worked against him, because he did everything else that should have gotten him elected. And when he ran, and he's still out there running, you know.
I think they affirmed his punditry status rather than his senatorial status.
Could very well be, yeah. Could very well be. Okay, so hard as it is to say goodbye, we've got to say goodbye until Thursday.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Challenges filed. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Trump campaign filing lawsuits in several states challenging votes cast in last week's election, one of them in Michigan.
That Detroit lawsuit contains several sworn affidavits from a few people that were inside the massive absentee ballot counting process in Detroit. They claim fraud. One of those affidavits comes from a Detroit employee who claims she saw so much illegal activity